You clicked on this video because you want realistic drum sounds, but you don't have a drum kit that costs thousands of dollars and 10 plus state-of-the-art microphones to record it with, right? Well, you're far from the only one. In the last 5 years producing indie folk and singer-songwriter music, I've tried just about every technique that there is to make realistic sounding fake drums, and I'm gonna show you how I do it. So especially if you make music that is similar to any of these artists, then I think this video is gonna be really helpful for you. Let's start with an overview of the basics. So there's two main ways to digitally make drums. There's drum VSTs, or like drum plugins, and then there's using samples. Now, one of these methods is definitely superior for making realistic sounding drum performances, and I'll explain why. Using samples from sites like Splice is becoming increasingly common, and it can definitely get good results, but in terms of realism and nuance, it might not be your best friend. Because there's one major problem. Let's say I want to make a simple drum fill like this one. So I can use my tom and snare samples and adjust the volume of the samples to match the real performance, but have a listen. It doesn't even sound vaguely realistic. This might seem obvious, but the issue is that there's a big difference between adjusting the volume of a single sample and an actual drum performance where the drum is hit in a variety of different ways at a variety of different velocities. To make this point extra clear, maybe the most extreme example I can think of is if I sing the same note really loudly and really quietly. I can level match these, but will they sound even vaguely similar? No, of course not. They're entirely different sounds. So the exact same thing applies to drums. So back to our example. We're going about this all wrong. What if I mixed and matched completely different samples? So this is the right line of thinking, and it sounds better, but it's a bit disjointed because I've just picked random samples that aren't even from like the same drum kit. So all of this is to say, when you're going for realistic drum sounds, go for a VST. Any good drum VST will have multiple velocities of each drum programmed in. So as you adjust the velocity, either manually in your piano roll or when you play it in on a MIDI instrument, it will trigger different samples of the same drum as opposed to just volume matching one sample. I've used a fair few drum VSTs over the years, and I'll be putting links to some of my favorites in the description. But there's one major caveat to all of this. For whatever reason, and I don't know enough about drums to speculate why this might be the case, I have never been satisfied with the sound of the cymbals in any drum VST. And I'm not the only one. Check out what my fellow musician slash YouTuber slash cool dude John Meyer has to say about this.
We typically hit most drums the same each time, so drums are relatively easy to sample, but the hi-hat is always different because your foot is opening and closing the hi-hats, and there have been quite a few times where I have recorded the kick and the snare with samples, and I go back and put a mic on the hi-hat and play the hi-hat, because the hi-hat is tricky.
I guess there are just so many ways that you can hit a cymbal that it's pretty much impossible to replicate in a VST form. And while that's definitely the most true for hi-hats, I think it applies to crashes and rides as well. So I eventually got fed up. I spent $1,387 buying a top quality hat, ride, and crash for my home studio. Here's the receipt. I didn't make that number up. So what I do now is I program my kicks, toms, and snares with my favorite VSTs, and then I record hats, rides, and crashes over them. And it's the best sounding drums I've ever gotten. So I truly believe that if you are willing and able to make that kind of investment, you will get the best results. I think it's a pretty perfect compromise because it's a lot cheaper than a full drum kit, and the main consideration is space. A couple cymbals are way smaller than having a whole drum kit set up all the time. So if you have a bit of budget to invest, cymbals should be your #1 priority. But now you might be thinking, Lucas, surely you're not gonna tell me to buy real drums on a video about how to make fake drums sound good, right? Don't worry, I got you. So I made a sample pack out of these 3 cymbals, and I designed it to be used specifically in the way I've described in this video. I've used it on a few productions for my clients so far, and I've had really positive feedback, and I'm confident in saying that it's about 98% as good as the real thing for 1.4% of the price. So in the rest of this video, I'm going to give you a brief walkthrough of what you can expect to find in the sample pack and show you a really quick example of how you can use it in your productions. Okay, first, the walkthrough. 230 one-shots and 30 loops of simple hat and ride patterns. For as much versatility as possible, I hit my hat, ride, and crash with rods, sticks, and mallets. But here's what makes this sample pack so different and user-friendly. For every type of hit, I've recorded 4 to 6 different velocities. The higher the number, the harder I hit the cymbal. This makes it nice and organized in your viewer and incredibly easy to mix and match samples of different velocities. I've also hit the cymbals in pretty much every way I could. For the ride, you'll find bell and side hits. And for the hat, you'll find fully closed, partially closed, mostly open, and fully open hits, as well as different lengths of open and closed samples. This is Lucas from the future. There's also rolls with sticks and mallets. Forgot to mention that, but those are very common in indie folk, so there's like a billion of them in the sample pack. Let me show you quickly why this system of the different velocities matters so much, and it goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of this video. The way that most people make hi-hat patterns looks something like this, and I mean, it sounds all right. They've just taken a single sample and they've adjusted the velocity either in the playlist manually or in a piano roll. But with my sample pack, you can combine like 3 or 4 different hits of the same hi-hat and level them as you desire. And listen to the difference. In just a second, I'll show you an example of using this sample pack in the context of a full production, but first, really quickly, here is the technical specs for you nerds. So the hat is a Sabian Paragon 13-inch, the ride is a Sabian 20-inch Stratus, and the cymbal is a Sabian AAX 16-inch. All the files are stereo waves with a bit depth of 24 and a sample rate of 48 kilohertz. They were all recorded by the Universal Audio Sphere DLX modeling microphone in 180 mode for a full stereo recording running through a Universal Audio Apollo Twin. The recording setup looked pretty much exactly like this, and here are the exact mic emulations I used if you're into that sort of thing. So I first had the idea to get these cymbals and make this sample pack when I was working on a collaborative sync project with some other producers on this song called Threads. Basically, I laid down these drums, I sent it back to my co-producers, and the feedback I got from all of them was, sounds great, except for the cymbals. Let me show you. So I was sent an instrumental that sounded like this. And I used the VST Drum Lab by Native Instruments to make these drums. So I really like this kick, tom, and snare sound. It's a little crunchy, kind of spacious. It's really nice, it suits the song. But these cymbals are just not it. So let's replace these cymbals using my sample pack. So first thing we have going on here is a ride playing quarter notes. So I'm gonna go to the one shots from my sample pack in the corner of the screen. And the rest of the drums have a pretty sharp attack, so I'm gonna use these sticks one shots. Now as you can see here, I have 5 different velocities of rides that I can mix and match to make a really realistic, nuanced sounding ride pattern. So I think I'm going to use ride 2, 3, and 4 and kind of intersperse them together. I'll drag them all to be 2 measures in length, and then I'll cut off some of the end. And it looks messy, but here's what that ride pattern sounds like now. Night and day. Now there's some hats and crashes as well. So I'm going to go to hat, sticks, and you can see just how many different articulations of hat hits there are in here. So I'm going to combine a few of them. We'll do a closed hat on the 3. And then maybe combine this lower velocity hat with a open close. Beautiful. And there's some crashes alongside the hats. So on the 3 here, and then on the 4 in the next bar. Now I'll just quickly mix these in, and there we have it. So here is what it sounds like with the old VST cymbals. And here it is with my sample pack. So you tell me which is better. And I just spent about 5 minutes on that little example. So there's so much more nuance that you can go into with these samples. I truly believe that combining VSTs with either a live performance or samples is the best way to get a realistic sounding drum sound. Assuming you don't have drums, you can try to do this technique by rummaging through Splice and mix and matching different samples that way, or you can use a sample pack that was specifically designed for this purpose, to replace live cymbals. The sample pack is available now for download in my Gumroad store, and the link is in the description as always. Thank you so much for the support from the bottom of my heart, and I can't wait to hear what you guys come up with using these sounds, because I know you're gonna make some absolute bangers, and I can't wait to hear them. I'll catch you next time. Peace.